Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Karen Ulrich Stacy. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Diversity Lab. We so appreciate that you've joined us midday, depending on where you are. We've got some amazing speakers today who are excited to share some of the work that they've been doing in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. We're going to start out just by me explaining very briefly what the Inclusion Blueprint is. That's where a lot of what we're going to talk about today comes from. And then I'm going to hand it over to Gina, our amazing moderator, who's the editor-in-chief of The American Lawyer. And then you're all going to get a chance to knowledge share with some of the leading law firms who are really taking a trailblazing approach, especially as it relates to linking compensation to the practices that they're undertaking from a diversity, equity, and inclusion standpoint. So welcome, everybody. So what is the Inclusion Blueprint? Very briefly, we started the Inclusion Blueprint in partnership with CHIPS, and I think most of you are probably familiar with CHIPS. CHIPS was founded many years ago now by 8 leading female IP chiefs in corporations. It's now grown to thousands and thousands of members. But CHIPS called us, Diversity Lab, and said, you know, there are lots of surveys in the industry that ask for diversity representation numbers, right? American Lawyer does a good job of that, and other organizations like NALP and MCCA and VOLT. But what we don't feel like is happening in the industry is measurement of inclusion. We talk about diversity and we usually say and inclusion, but we often haven't really talked about what that would look from a measurement standpoint. So Diversity Lab went behind the scenes. We looked at all the research that we could find on inclusion and equity practices. We looked inside the law, we looked outside the law, and we compiled a list of things that law firms and corporations are doing and could be doing to create greater inclusion and greater equity so that all of your talent has equal access to the type of opportunities that are going to help them get into your organizations, stay in your organizations, and hopefully advance in your organizations. So born from that was the Inclusion Blueprint. It provides both a roadmap of the inclusion activities that you can be doing. The interesting thing about it is it doesn't just look at what you're doing firm-wide or what you're doing corporation-wide. It looks at what you're doing in each practice group and each division. And law firms, as you all know, for a lot of our associates and talent, that's where the rubber meets the road. So if we're thinking about inclusion and we're thinking about equity, where the work gets allocated, how origination credit gets shared, all of that happens at the practice group level or the division level. And so we wanted to make sure that we captured both in the Inclusion Blueprint. So as Aaron likes to say, it's a roadmap, but it's also an assessment so that you can track where you stand vis-a-vis each of these practices. Again, we've been doing this from 2018 until now. This past year, we had 20 what we call champions. These are firms that scored really high in what is a very tough set of criteria. We not only look at diversity representation, but we look at progress. How diverse is the management committee? How diverse is your comp committee? How diverse is each of the practice groups? And we look at it by individually historically underrepresented groups. We look at women, we look at racial and ethnic lawyers, we look at LGBTQ+, and we look at lawyers with disabilities. We even ask as part of this that firms take into consider intersectionality, right? That there are differences among those different groups, and there are people who identify as part of many of those different groups. So we try to tackle it in a lot of different ways to make sure that everyone is included. This year, we also added a do something hard action. One of those actions we're going to talk about today, which is the 50 hours of billable credit for meaningful contributions to diversity, equity, inclusion. So we'll get to that. Before we do, I just briefly want to tell you who's going to share knowledge with you today. Gina, and for those of you who have not met or gotten a chance to see Gina's writing and her amazing editorial skills, she is the editor-in-chief of The American Lawyer. She does write a lot as well, and so she's had 2 really great articles on this topic in the last couple of weeks that I encourage everyone to take a look at. She's moderating our session today, and she's doing so with 4 law firms who were named Inclusion Champs this past year. Krista Sanford. Krista's from Baker Botts. She wears many hats in addition to servicing her clients. She's on the executive committee. She's deputy chair of the IP group, Intellectual Property, and she co-chairs the firm's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. And I've known Krista for a long time. Krista, thank you for joining us. We also have with us Amy Santos. Amy is the Chief Diversity Officer at Cooley, and she's going to talk a little bit about what Cooley's done, not only in the Do Something Hard, but some additional efforts that they have taken to link compensation to DEI. Also joining us today, who I think everyone knows, he is incredibly well respected and well known in our industry, John Eno. John's the Chief Diversity Officer at Reed Smith. Hi, John. And then also, last but not least, Katia Justin. Katia is the co-managing partner of Jenner and Block. And we are super connected, Katia, as you probably know, because Courtney Carter, who we love and adore and is your Chief Diversity Officer, was previously at Diversity Lab. So you stole to Courtney, but we still love you. And you're very lucky. All right, so Gina, I'm going to pass it on to you so that we can talk about some of these diversity and inclusion practices that we're linking to compensation. And as we talk about that, Gina, I want to remind folks that if you haven't had a chance to look at the Inclusion Champions and Findings press release, we included in there that there are 6 inclusion practices, 3 of which we're going to talk about today, that actually correlate to greater diversity. And that's one of the benefits of the Inclusion Blueprint, is we can look at diversity representation, we can correlate it to inclusion practices, and then we can tell you, based on leveraging that data, which of those inclusion practices are going to have a bigger impact more quickly on diversity in your law firms. 3 of them we're going to talk about today, and I won't tell you the other 3 because that way you'll go click on the link and actually read the full 6. But Gina, let me pass it on to you so that we can talk about at least those 3 today.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm so excited for this conversation. I mean, diversity, as you mentioned, is something that we have been covering as it relates to the legal profession for decades, frankly, at the American Lawyer. And sometimes it does feel like we're writing the same articles over again, or that it's a lot of theory. And what I am so excited about the work that Diversity Lab is doing and that all of the partner firms are doing is they're taking that theory and they're applying it in the real world. And so I'm so excited to pepper these folks with questions today about, okay, what does that mean in practice? What does this look like? How do you accomplish this in a way that makes a difference that you can track and see. And I love the focus on inclusion, because I think particularly in law firms, as we know, it's that equity and ownership and going beyond just the numbers is really where the power is, and then holding folks of any stripe accountable for making those meaningful advancements through tying it to compensation. I mean, it's just such a perfect intersection of where law firms can make a difference. So I'm really excited about hearing how to make that all happen. And I want to start with a kind of just a topic that we've been writing a lot about. And one of the key findings here is tying, or giving billable credit for DE&I initiatives. And all of you and 20 plus other firms, and I think probably more, we keep writing about them, I know, on a daily basis, have done that. So there's a lot of facets that I want to kind of get under the hood on that broad topic. So maybe we can do a little bit of round robin. I'll kick it to you to kind of understand different elements of tying that credit to DE&I initiatives. But first, just really what the goal of doing something like that is. So if each of you could take maybe about a minute just to talk about why did we even do this? And Krista, I'll start with you.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, Gina. Yes. So it started for us with respect to this specific initiative in 2019 when we developed a new strategy for the firm with our new managing partner, our Accelerate strategy. And D&I emerged as one of the main initiatives that we wanted to focus on with this strategy. And we're working on that through D&I, we're doing a number of different things under that umbrella. But specifically with this, we wanted to make sure that the associates and the partners at the firm knew that from a leadership standpoint, this was really important. And the associates, when they get credit for doing things, they recognize the importance of how we view it too. And so that was the why, one of the driving whys behind why we implemented this.
Thank you. Amy, what about at Cooley?
Yes, it was really a discussion that for too long, organizations have really benefited from the volunteer time and energy of those that are traditionally underrepresented in big law. And we're relying on those that are traditionally underrepresented to help us attract and recruit new talent. to help us achieve our diversity goals. So we felt it was really important to lead the industry by appropriately recognizing the contributions of the very populations we're seeking to grow, retain, and promote. And I think at the end of the day, it's firms like the firms represented here, putting our money where our mouth is and ultimately strengthening and upholding the cultures of our organizations.
Thanks, Amy. Katya, I would love to hear why Jenner kind of took this approach. Looks like, yeah, we're having a little trouble unmuting. Oh, got that for a second. How about while we try that, I'll kick it to John for a second and you can keep working on that. Sorry. John,
Thanks,
Gina. Why did you decide to do this?
Absolutely. And wow, the power of the Diversity Lab. Welcome everyone, 135 people. That just shows you the draw of everyone coming here. So I see some friends and colleagues out there. I see you. So what we were trying to accomplish, a lot of things, I think everyone's said it already, the so-called diversity tax that, people of color, the person comes in for an interview, like who has to go interview them, who has to go do the OCI, who has to be on lead the diversity efforts. And so we certainly wanted to recognize that so-called address the so-called diversity tax, but obviously getting people that historically aren't in underrepresented groups, women, to participate and actively support our DE&I mission and incentivize those actions. The final thing I want to say is that, when I first took this role probably close to 6 years ago now, I made a specific point that DE&I is important for the business. It's not to be viewed like charity. It's not to be viewed like pro bono. This is a nice thing to do because you're nice people. This is important for the business. And by signaling that we are willing to put our money where our mouth is, like Amy said, signals that this is important and tied to our business. And that's another key factor for us.
No, that's huge. And to your point about really making sure that more and more people are being involved in these activities, and particularly at the associate level. I mean, they have billable hours to hit. So to know that they can spend some of that time elsewhere has to be so empowering for many of them who may not feel otherwise that they could. Katya, I would love your thoughts on this. I think we got you sorted here.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. First of all, I just wanted to agree with you with your remarks about Courtney. She's amazing, and we are very, very lucky to have her here at Jenner. In terms of why we made the decision to do this, our goal is to attract and retain great diverse talent. It's one of our core values, and kind of to echo others, we wanted to put our money where our mouth is. But also taking a step back, we want to empower everyone to participate in this effort. And associates are consumed with the billable hour and hitting their metrics and being type A in that way. And so we're trying to incentivize and encourage and show that we are giving this economic value, and it is something that every single person is expected to participate in. This is not a women's issue. This is not a diverse lawyers issue. This is everyone's issue. So we wanted across the board commitment, and that's why we decided to do it.
Love that. Thank you. So Amy, at Cooley, what goes into this? What would I get credit for if I were doing DE&I work?
We spent a lot of time talking about this. To the previous point, everybody is expected to contribute to diversity. It is not just interviewing a diverse candidate. We are giving billable credit for leading on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Are you helping develop firm policy? Are you sitting, chairing an affinity group? Are you sitting on the diversity committee? Are you spending your evening representing the firm at a diversity job fair? Are you spending 2 hours taking somebody to lunch or having a Zoom call to talk about what it's like to be a diverse individual at the firm, or how you're an ally at the firm, or how the firm approaches diversity, equity, and inclusion? So we're really trying to take the distinction of leading in and really driving forward how to create change at the firm.
That's great. And Krista, is it similar at Baker Botts? What's happening there?
Yeah, very similar to what Amy just delineated for Cooley. And one other area where we are including billable credit for work in this is with respect to social justice related community activities. We're doing work too where we are providing free legal services that wouldn't necessarily qualify as pro bono under the various state definitions. And so doing work that's related to social justice also is under this umbrella.
That's great. And John, how about at Reed Smith? And you know, and I also would love for you to just kind of throw in there, who is able to take advantage of this? And I think you kind of mentioned before, but is it everybody at the firm can jump in on this?
Thank you, Gina. Yeah, at Reed Smith, we elected to have all timekeepers were eligible to record the billable hour, the non-billable hour credits. And you know, specifically, we've always had, I think all of our law firms have a requirement that you do quality non-billable time. You just can't only bill time and not participate in other firm activities. So that was kind of the challenge here, saying, okay, what is the creditable time versus the things that you kind of expected to do on top of everything. So whether it's business development, training, all those kind of things that we expect everyone to do outside of the D&I space. So what we do is, you know, on a tactical level, I think hopefully everyone else does this as well. You have a specific matters or matters that you can record your time to so that it ends up tracking into the billable hour total. Also helps us track in terms of what the aggregate number of hours and the aggregate value that we're investing in D&I. But like everyone else, you know, as an example of how this kind of the delineation between general things and specific D&I things, when you talk about recruiting, okay, if you're involved in recruiting, if a Black person comes into your office, you say, does that count? You know, that's kind of a question. And so what we say is like, no, if you're recruiting, you're recruiting. It doesn't matter who you're recruiting if it's general recruiting. So if you're going on campus, you're seeing 35 different people, you're not going to count the people that the women or the people of color or the LGBT people. Well, that's a diversity recruiting, right? But if you're doing specific diversity recruiting activities, like for us, you're going to an HBCU, you're hosting a job fair, you go talk to the Latino Law Students Association, those kind of things certainly will count. And obviously, you know, all the things we talked about, developing programming, participating in programming. One of the things we do whenever an event comes up, and this is really helps promote the use of the billing number, is we say, like people used to say, this counts towards CLE. We said this counts towards your billable, you know, creditable but non-billable D&I hours. So, and here's the number to record it to. So it really helps people focus on that, hey, I can actually get credit for this.
No, those are really good points, John, because I mean, you're right. There's a lot of other things, even, you know, some firms give pro bono credit for hours billed, and how much, when you're adding different things that you're giving credit towards, obviously it's the firm needs to understand what goes where and how to count that. And Katya, I'd love to know, you know, at Jenner, what goes into your program.
So we try to provide pretty detailed guidance to our lawyers, depending on what level they are in their career, in terms of what types of diversity work will count. The reason we do that is that we want folks involved in things that actually make change. We don't want activities, we want actions. So we try to be as detailed and directive as possible to help our lawyers engage in the most productive way possible so that we can continue to work to move the needle. You know, folks, you know, going to training, that's a good thing, but there are probably other things that we should be doing to attract and retain the best diverse talent in the business. That's the goal. So we try to provide a lot of feedback and guidance to our lawyers.
Thank you. And there is a question from somebody about whether or not joining external diversity organizations and serving particularly on their leadership would count toward this work. I mean, maybe, I don't know, raise of hands, or if anybody wants to particularly comment, if that counts. Okay.
Okay. I mean, profile in your communities is important, not only in diversity organizations, but in other organizations too, in a variety of respects. So we look for opportunities for our lawyers to join boards and to join organizations committed to diversity enhancement, because it's good for their careers. It's a great way to get ideas and a great way to look for opportunities for the law firm to improve.
Gina, if I could follow up on Katya's point regarding the action. You know, I'm sure a lot of us are doing this too, but when people are writing down their time under the number, we look at it also. So there's a feedback loop that happens. So we can see, you know, is this really making a change. What are you really doing with this? Are there things that you can do to even improve and grow? So I think with each of us in our leadership roles, we get to see that data, and that's really helpful too.
No, that's so important in assessing kind of what's going into this and how, and and we can talk a little bit about this in a little bit, but, at the end of year one, what does success look like? And do you lessons learned about, okay, maybe we don't want this or don't want that. But before we get to kind of assessing the impact, let's talk a little bit about buy-in, both from just launching something like this, and then there's the buy-in on the utilization side. So if each of you could kind of think about it in that perspective, were there any struggles in getting your partnership or your firm to agree to implement something like this, or things that you had to overcome? And what are you planning to do to get folks to, as many timekeepers as you can, to take part? So John, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, frankly, the concept of being billable hour credit for D&I work is not new. I'd been lobbying for it for quite a while. And frankly, I kind of, saw some reactions, resistance is saying, well, we don't give credit for people to do marketing hours. We don't give credit for people who, develop forms and templates and all those things. So, we're getting down a slippery slope, John. But frankly, after the murders of George Floyd and so many others, Reed Smith, we adopted what we call the Racial Equity Action Plan, and that we had a task force to say, what are we going to do to address the status of racial injustice in our world. And one of the topics that came up, ideas that came up, is resurfaced was, let's give billable hour credit for some of the D&I work. So we're really able to take advantage of that at the time. In terms of how we messaged it at the time, obviously it came out in the context of our Racial Equity Action Plan, but it's so important that the messaging starts from the top. So as much as I would like to take credit for it, I'm not going to, but as much as I would like to take credit for doing some of this, it comes from Sandy Thomas, our global managing partner. He wants everyone in the organization to know the importance, why we're doing this, and really signaling that leadership. But the other thing is that this comes from our associates committee in particular. We've talked to them, and whenever with some of these ideas that really come up, this is something that they can take ownership of as well. So, involving them from the get-go was really, really important. And then finally, just again, we're always, every opportunity you have to talk about it, you do. So whether it's in the press, American Lawyer, of course, social media, in your firm-wide communications, we do that. And as I said, anytime we launch an event or a new program, we're just launching our inclusive leadership program that's going to be for all partners, council, senior staff, and the like. And as a reminder, you'll get billable hour credit, credit for this case.
No, that's great. Thank you, John. And Amy, would love to know, just Cooley, kind of any hurdles or best practices to implementing something like this, and how are you going to get folks to really dive in and utilize it?
Yeah, I'm really pleased and honored to state that we messaged and implemented our policy in January or February of 2020. So once we came up with our board action plan around diversity after the murders of George Floyd in the summer, we already had this in place, and we were seeing the many ways that people were engaged and leaning in. So we have the ability to look backwards a little bit longer to see the growth over time. We're looking at success as to measuring year-over-year use, but then also, are we getting more and more people, more allies involved? Are we thinking about the inclusion aspect of the billable credit? This year, we went a little bit further also. In addition to providing the billable credit, we, to some of the points made, recognize and really want to stress that it's important for everybody to lean in. So in addition to the 50 hours of billable credit for those that have the hours guidelines to hit for bonus eligibility, our CEO and chairman sent a message to the entire firm stating that every timekeeper was expected to spend at least 20 hours a year on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. A little bit of a broader explanation, or you're able to attend trainings, attend Heritage Month events, serve as mentors. So it's a little bit more of the participatory piece in addition to the leadership piece. So we've seen such success with the 50 hours billable credit that we're now looking for more creative ways to carry that along, create some more accountability and tracking that we can then give to our compensation committee, to our partnership nominating committee, and have more metrics in place.
That's great. Thank you. Krista, I'm going to add a little wrinkle to the question for you because you also, you have practice responsibilities and are overseeing, and Karen mentioned, how some of this can be done. You can break it out and look at specific groups. And so I just wonder if, in terms of implementation, does it differ by practice area? Where does the responsibility lie in terms of who is monitoring this, and then utilization? So sorry, I'm giving you a whole bunch.
Yes, yeah. So I'll start and you tell me if I haven't hit everything. So from a billable credit for D&I hours, that flows up to the D&I co-chairs to review and oversee. And so I think I saw a question in the chat about who's reviewing these entries. That is something that me and my co-chair review on a monthly basis. We get a report and we see who's billed time and what they're billing time to. And so from a D&I standpoint, it's at the firm-wide D&I level, which I think is a little different from some other things that are more departmental based. And I do want to just hit on one point about how this came about and the champions behind it. I remember when I was an associate on the associates committee asking for this many years ago. But I think the pivotal change, and I hit on this already, our new managing partner, John Martin, he had a vision for this firm. He has a vision for this firm. And when he started that strategic planning process and D&I bubbled up as an important initiative, and when I went to him and I said, I want to help lead this initiative, he allowed us the ability to think big and broad and to do things that we may not have been able to do 10 years ago. So I give so much credit to John Martin for his support and his willingness to allow us to push boundaries that we are hopefully breaking, and we're going to improve in this area.
That's great. Thank you. No, it's so important to mention just the leadership buy-in and buy-in in general. And so Katya, at Jenner, what are you doing to get folks to really utilize this, and any hurdles that you faced in that process?
We really didn't face any hurdles, and it's a piece of a much larger imperative that we're in the process of activating and that we've been involved in for many years. We require our partners to fill out a diversity action plan and track their progress, and they get kind of a score at the end of the year. And in our compensation process, that is discussed in respect to each partner. And that's been in place for a number of years and preceded this measure and this effort. So it's all part of a piece, and we're big believers in setting metrics and targets and holding ourselves accountable. And we're not afraid to set stretch goals. We have a pledge that is public that we've made with LCLD that we're really, really proud of. And we monitor it, and we may not achieve everything that we've laid out, but we're trying not to be afraid of setting those stretch goals that may be tough to achieve, but it provides for goals in terms of the percentage of leadership we have who are diverse. It provides for our sponsorship program, which is something we are super proud of, and Courtney really deserves so much of the accolades for that. It's incredible, and it has a huge accountability piece. So it's of a piece of a larger imperative, and we didn't receive any pushback at all.
No, that's wonderful. And that's why I love what Diversity Lab is doing, but do something hard. I mean, it's just the stretch goals. It's so important in this space and in the law firm environment. So I think that's great. All right, quickly, because I want to get to the compensation piece that you alluded to, Katya, but want to get all of your thoughts on what does success look like in this space? How many, obviously 100% utilization, that's great, but how are you measuring this and in what time frame? So let's start with Amy.
Yeah, I think success is one, ensuring that the people that are spending the time are appropriately billing and capturing their time. So like John, what we're doing is at the bottom of emails when we're making asks or requests, reminding them of the billable code. Success looks like having more allies involved, more and more people over time. And success, in my opinion, looks like people saying, hey, I hit the 50 hours billable credit, I'm tripling it. Can the firm think about giving more? We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but I see that as a direction coming in the future.
I love it. Yeah. Krista, what about at Baker Botts? What would success be?
Yeah, I share Amy's sentiments on what success is. And as I think through, this last year and seeing the work that folks did in this area, I think we need to continue to improve in letting people know that you have 100 hours that you could use on D&I efforts and expanding the group. Because I did see there was a subset and it was not as expansive as I would have liked it to see in 21. So we need to do more in really getting the word out about you have this bucket of time that goes to billable credit that you can use. And it's a lot, it's 100 hours, so use it. And let's have everyone involved in these efforts.
Absolutely. No, so important. John, what about it at Reed Smith? What will success look like?
So this 2021 was a full year of having the billable hour number to record your time, and we had 10,000 hours recorded to that number last year, which equates to about $7 million. And so that means the firm is, quote, investing that amount of time because the people are doing that. Now, I can't quite equate in terms of the bonuses people get or hitting the billable hour targets because of it, because there's a lot of other different things that go into that total. But I'm actually really inspired by the rest of the panel here because the data analysis that we should be doing, and that I'm going to do it following this call, is go back and let's also look at where are those hours, who's incurring those hours, and I can do a straight up average in terms of total per timekeeper. And in particular, I said at the beginning, one of the goals was to address the diversity tax, so that the historically diverse attorneys, women that are spending the time, they get credit for it. But how about those allies? How about those folks? How many people are doing that? And we'll talk about a little bit in terms of compensation, how we're rewarding those people. But that, to me, as we said at the beginning, I think Katya said it really well, everyone needs to be involved in our efforts. Everyone needs to be supporting what we're doing, not like we've seen in the past where it's only the people of color, the diverse folks that are working on the diversity committee, right? Everyone needs to be part of these efforts. So if we start to analyze how many people or the total number of hours of everyone, the non-diverse folks, that to me is also a great measure of success.
Absolutely. No, and I mean, and you should get credit too for the fact that all of those hours, I mean, that comes at a time. It's not as though demand was soft in the last couple of years. People had plenty of other things to be doing and they were still making a commitment there, and to what that could be if you expanded that out. Sure, that's huge. Well,
I know that people, because I got an email from I want to call him out, but the head of an office diversity committee. And he goes, oh, the stuff that we're doing for this pipeline program, does that count towards billable hour credit? They go, yes, of course it does. Why didn't you record it last year, right? So there's a lot of people that don't even know to do that. So,
hard enough to get people to track their time, right?
Exactly, to record their time.
So, right. I mean, that's probably not insignificant. Katya, what about it, Jenner?
So to me, success is the closure of the opportunity gap and establishing relationships with clients. So we are looking for opportunities to introduce our lawyers into client relationships and help, solidify those strategic partnerships that I think every law firm craves to have with its important clients and even its growing clients. That's the point of the realm in law firm life. So we look at this as all a means to that end. And especially through our sponsorship program, which everything knits together and is part of this whole piece and strategy. But we want our younger lawyers, our younger diverse lawyers to engage in and solidify strong relationships with clients. That is the keys to the kingdom, and that's our goal.
Well, perfect segue, because Karen's been too quiet over there in the corner. I'm bringing her back in. The client is essential here, and you do so much work with law departments. So what role can the law departments play in either helping these efforts or what could they be doing more to make this a meaningful piece of the equation?
So first of all, Gina, no one has ever in my life once said Karen's being too quiet, so thank you. And I'm going to tell my friends and family that you said that. American Lawyer Editor-in-Chief said I was too quiet. So to answer your question, there's two different ways we're seeing client interaction in this realm. First of all, clients are doing this exact thing, right? They're tying executive compensation to DEI, sometimes DEI contributions, and sometimes, Katya, as you've said, DEI quotas or metrics or consideration factors for what they're trying to hopefully have their workforce look like. I know Erin's going to place a few of these links in the chat, so I won't go into great detail, but it's many of your clients, right? American Express has tied executive comp to DEI. Starbucks has done so. Nike has done so. I mean, the list goes on and on. Wells Fargo, Chipotle. So it's not, you know, everyone looks to the tech companies and says, well, they're trying harder or they're doing things more nimbly, but they're not. We're seeing Wells Fargo and American Express, right? We're seeing banks and financial institutions doing it. We're seeing retail do it. So if there was any question as to if you're trying to look more like your clients and align with the values of your clients, this makes perfect sense that law firms would be moving in the same direction. The second thing we're seeing is the client interaction with the firms, and in particular, the DEI credit, because Katya nailed it, right? The idea is, what are your associates and clients doing in partnership with, you know, your clients? Are they strategic? Are they interacting with your clients on these matters? Are they talking about these matters? And at least a couple of the 20+ firms give credit for relationship partners and associates who are actually working with clients on DEI for both their corporation and the firm. So it's not just about the work you're doing with your clients, but it's in partnership with your clients. So we'll put some of those links in so that people can look at them. One other thing I'll mention, just in case, because I know it's awfully helpful for law firms to be able to say, these 25 law firms are doing it and these 16 corporations are doing it. And so to your benefit, WilmerHale published a really interesting white paper in conjunction with the Joint Center for Political and Economics. And as part of that, and we'll post this in there, and WilmerHale, by the way, is also one of our inclusion champs this past year. As part of it, it talks about how many corporations have moved to tying corporate exec comp to DEI. And I will tell you just this, and it will be a bit of a teaser, so you click on the link and look at WilmerHale's report. It's doubled in the last 2 years. So we are really seeing a movement towards people really aligning their rewards with the efforts that we should be making for all the reasons John said related to diversity and inclusion.
And if I could just jump in really quickly, we are so grateful to our clients who push us. I cannot tell you how many times I have just thanked general counsels or whomever in the legal department that have made our jobs harder. Because that's how change is happening in law firms. It's our clients telling us, you know, we want this and we need this to happen, or you're not going to be one of our preferred providers anymore. And that message going out far and wide to law firms is really making effective change. So at every chance I get, I always express my deep thanks, because we need that partnership to really affect real change at law firms.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Katya. And I just have to apologize. The South Jersey sun is not cooperating. You think 2 years into a pandemic, I would have had this whole setup figured out already. Sorry, but I can see you, and that's the most important thing. So I want to go to another factor that the Diversity Lab has really identified as a key to being an inclusion champion, and that's tying compensation directly to DE&I efforts. But I have to admit, it's something for me that I get it in theory, but what does that look like in practice, and how do you measure it? And there's just so much under the hood that I think needs to be explained in order to do this right. So, I mean, maybe we can start with this concept of, what are meaningful contributions or lack thereof in terms of how you're measuring folks that impact, particularly on the partner or practice group leader level, the compensation for those folks as it relates to DE&I. So Krista, do you want to kick us off there?
Sure, yeah, I'll just start with one, and then I know others will chime in. But I will say, if there were 40 firms that were inclusion champions based on doing this, there are 40 ways to look at partner compensation and how to invoke D&I efforts in the evaluation process, because we all do compensation differently. One of the things that we wanted to really incorporate and highlight within our evaluation of partners is how they are working with racially diverse, ethnically diverse attorneys and women attorneys. Specifically, with the number of hours that you are billing attorney on, what's the percentage? And so one of the things that we did, this started in 2019 with an idea, and then it took about 2020 and a little through 2021 to implement. And we created a dashboard for partners to view where you click on our internal portal and you can see, based on the number of hours for which you are the billing attorney, what's the percentage of hours that were billed by diverse lawyers, what's the percentage of hours that were billed by women attorneys, and then what is the comparison to the hours billed by racially diverse attorneys in the department and the comparison to those billed by women attorneys in the department. So you see how you are tracking in comparison to the department. So that's version 1. We are building on that because we want to add that firm-wide comparison too. We want to add in another group of diverse individuals, LGBTQ+, into that analysis too. So that is one input that we're using in order to develop our whole iteration around partner compensation and how we put D&I into it.
Thank you. And can I just ask a follow-on to that? Does just how folks are assigning out matters then factor into any of that? Are you paying attention or doing anything differently in the assignment process?
Yes. So one, of course, it's going to impact who they're assigning it to. If they know on the back end, we're looking at who's billing the hours, right? And then it also helps when you're doing pitches, because when people just put people on pitches to put them on, but then they bill no hours, well, it's not going to show up well on the dashboard. So we're kind of preempting that workaround, right? So what we did on the pitch side, we actually piloted this in the IP side. So this is where my practice leadership comes into play. We look at every pitch that goes out the door, a new pitch that's developed, to look at the diversity of those that are included as originating the work and those that are included on the team, to see if they are hitting at least 50% diverse or women attorneys included within the team. And so that's how we're managing at a very practical level. And so that's something that we piloted within the IP group over the last 6 months. We saw the numbers increase as far as the inclusion of diverse and women attorneys within pitches. But also, it was interesting because when we didn't see it, we pushed back on the partner that sent us this pitch. And we said, hey, you need to do something with this. And there were some partners that told us why they didn't think they needed to. And we said, no, this is important to Baker Botts. We understand your client may not think it's important, but it's important to us. So we need to adjust it. And so we're having those conversations on a very regular basis. And I think that's really helping to improve the culture of our firm, right? That this is just part of who we are and how we do business.
That's so interesting, because I mean, you hear from law firms on a number of issues, whether it's innovation more broadly or in any specific area. It's, oh, some clients care, some don't. Pricing, but when you just make it a firm initiative, and it doesn't matter what clients are saying. But Katya, I'd love your thoughts on this, because clients I am hearing are increasingly, and Karen, you may know too, asking on RFPs or asking not even on RFPs, but as the matter progresses, yeah, I saw your pitch team. Please tell me who is actually doing the work. Are you sharing this data, I guess, back with the client?
We absolutely will share that data, and we appreciate the question, because the worst story you can hear is about folks being asked to participate on a pitch to win the work and then not having the opportunity to work on the matter. So we track that internally, and that's just unacceptable. We very much will provide that information and are open to discussing it. We also are refining our matter opening process so that the partner who's opening the matter has to answer a series of questions geared toward who's going to be staffed on the matter and looking through the lens of diversity and opportunity. And in terms of the way we celebrate it in the firm, and I think to change hearts and minds if they need changing, or at least to animate people and get them excited to participate in this revolution, is we share hero stories. And one of my favorites is one of our very senior lawyers who introduced a diverse woman to the heads of all the business units in a big client. And now she's their go-to person. And when you help forge those relationships. That's what makes the change. And then people get elevated in their careers and they're seen at the top of organizations, or they're seen leading a client team. And that just inspires all of that from the ground up. So we look for those hero stories to celebrate as well, because we think that can really animate behavior.
Yeah. Amy, at Cooley, what goes into measuring the success or lack thereof of partner DE&I efforts?
So to Chris's point, every firm has a completely different way of handling partner compensation. Ours is a very holistic process where we do not have origination credit or metrics in that sense to take a look at. However, all of the partners are asked to write the About Me Partner Comp memo, and diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of the top questions, where there are feedback sessions and discussions digging into how did partners contribute. Contributions millions of different ways. It could be how you're staffing your teams, the recruiting that you're focused on, your succession planning, acting as a valued mentor, pushing back on a client if there are inappropriate comments or requests, protecting your team's time, ensuring that your team can have the rest that they need from a mental health perspective, ensuring that people have coverage for parental leave. We do ask those in leadership, particularly our practice group leaders, to develop practice group plans with an eye towards diversity every year, and the compensation committee tracks those as well. As part of our board action plan on diversity, we are very public that we instituted 360 reviews for partners. The feedback from those 360 reviews makes its way to our compensation committee. We also are implementing the hours metrics for next year, and we're requiring compensation feedback sessions for partners where their progress on diversity falls short. So we're really pointing out you could have earned more if you had leaned in more on this. I think it's important to approach it from both the carrot and the stick.
Thank you. It's so interesting. And John, would love to hear what's happening at Reed Smith in terms of what factors into whether a partner is or practice leader is successful in this area.
Absolutely, and love, Amy, that concept of using both the carrot and the stick. We probably lean more towards the carrot at this point, but maybe it's time to break out the whipping stick. I guess Gina, I'd answer in three ways. So we have different methods, I guess, of incentivizing or rewarding, whether you're a member of the leadership team, like a practice group leader or executive committee or office managing partner and the like, whether you're just a run-of-the-mill partner or associates as well. And there's three different ways to really get at it. One is the metrics that we're talking about, but also some of the actions and things that we're doing as well. So first, for our leadership, if you're a practice group leader and the like, for the last 4 years or so, we've had scorecards similar to the dashboard that Chris is mentioning, but with respect to your practice group or your office, what does the diversity look like in well, the current snapshot and the year-over-year increases? So quarterly, I publish to that group where they rank, amongst all the other offices or all the other practice groups, and they're a competitive group of folks, and so. Inevitably, when I first rolled it out, I get a call from the person who's at the bottom because you got the data wrong. It shouldn't be at the bottom. I said, well, let's see how we can get you up. The other thing there is to notice that it's not absolute head count. It's really, we look at trends, year-over-year progression, and that's how I rank them, because people in our Pittsburgh office, for example, said, look, I'm never going to be able to compete with the people in Miami. I'm going to compete with the people in Los Angeles because they're pulling from a lot more diverse talent base. And I said, yeah, but if you could add 5 more to your office, that might be a 10% increase compared to someone in Miami who's probably bringing a lot more people. So that's why we look at that in terms of percentage increase. So like so many, like Amy was mentioning, our management, we have management bonus plan that has specific metrics. And instead of what did you do for diversity? Well, you start to look at specific metrics that they point to in their own self-evaluations. Also, all of our management get the 360 reviews, so you're evaluated in terms of how you're doing different things. And so this is also part of your 360 review. For run-of-the-mill partners, I guess I'd call them, we also have what we call the client level scorecards, where for every client for which you serve as the relationship partner, you get a scorecard in terms of the diversity of your team. And not only we show the hours, but we also show the origination credits. We have what's called manner responsible credits to know who you're doling out the credits to, because we know that credits lead to increased compensation and lead to promotion. So that's why credits are so important. What I will say about that is we just did this year in response to some feedback is we ended up backing out the statistics of the individual partner because frankly, some of our white male partners go, okay, so now you're judging me against the woman of color who's getting all this credit because her own time is in there and her own credits are in there. Shouldn't you be really viewing how I'm doling out to other people, involving other people? So we ended up backing that out to try to quote level the playing field. And finally, for associates and all partners, in addition to the 50 billable hour time, which goes towards your hitting all these bonuses that you're eligible for, and we also give discretionary bonuses for extraordinary, above and beyond times. So whether you're an associate, whether you're a partner, we want to make sure we're recognizing those efforts. And so it might be in the category of, say, an associate who's leading our ERG, or like say our LGBT ERG, they might spend more than 50 hours in our case. So how do we incentivize and reward that behavior? Want to make sure that we're giving this discretionary bonuses, but also for the activities they do. So like a lot of people are saying, we have a reverse mentoring program, participating in that. We have a sponsorship program where partners are sponsoring diverse folks. And so we want to make sure that those activities are also rewarded. So that's where we do it through some kind of discretionary bonus.
So and John both mentioned the 360 reviews, and just wanted to get from Krista and Katya, who kind of has a say in whether somebody was successful or not in DEI initiatives? What information trickles up into that?
Want to go first, Katya?
Sorry, yep, sorry. That was a moderator fail there. Yes, please, Katya.
Are you asking in respect of associates or partners? Or
right. Does anybody, right, do the associates have any involvement? Is there a 360 review at your firm, or who's kind of measuring the success?
So at Jenner, we don't have a formal 360 review process. It's actually something we've been talking about. We have an associates committee with which Randy Mehrberg, my co-managing partner, and I meet regularly, and we get lots of ideas from them, and that's been among them, and we've been talking about that. But in terms of the evaluative process, it's pretty robust, and diversity, equity, and inclusion and our other core values are very much a part of it. Like you've heard from the other folks on this Zoom, we are holistic in the way that we compensate, and we do look at activities beyond the billable hour. And beyond business generation. I mean, those are metrics, but those are just two metrics among several. So at Jenner, the associate evaluation process is, we have a committee, and each individual, it takes a lot of time, and each individual is looked at with a lot of detail, and each person gets an opportunity to talk about things that they're proud of and things that they've worked on that reflect our core values. And likewise, in the partner compensation process, it's holistic, and we are very focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're focused on pro bono and social justice work, as well as client development and busyness. One of our lawyers, put it beautifully, I thought. We should all think about the quantum of time we spend every week and how we can use that time to elevate our institution in every way possible, including by generating additional exciting work from our clients, but also promoting our other core values, which are important and really define us.
So I'm going to answer it in a couple of ways, Gina. One, with respect to getting feedback from associates to inform partners. That's actually something that we're talking about, and how we can add that to our process. I was emailing our professional development director a few months ago, and we had some ideas. So I'm hoping that'll be incorporated this year. Next year, when we're back together, I'll tell you what we did. And so the second part of it is how do we evaluate partners, again, holistically, wholesomely, and I'm going to give you a few points. So from a self-evaluation standpoint, each partner has to specifically address the material efforts that they put into integrating and identifying women and diverse lawyers into their client work streams and in their practice, but then also how they're promoting and identifying women and diverse lawyers in client relationships. So that input comes in. Then that is reviewed and evaluated by departmental leadership to determine initial recommendations. And then the executive committee reviews and evaluates all of that, right? And then the D&I committee co-chairs, myself and my co-chair, we then look at the partner compensation in view of that information. And then we go to the next step of once all that is solidified, we then have feedback meetings with our partners. And so those feedback meetings are held by departmental leadership with those partners in the group. And that's when we're having that circle back based on what the inputs that we got, the conversations that were had, and then giving them feedback on where things landed for the year.
You take this seriously. That's amazing. I mean, it just shows the level of commitment that's needed to really make this successful. So thank you so much. I'm really glad you got into that level of detail. Karen, would love
if I could just say one more thing in terms of rewarding, I would love for firms to reward the practice group leaders that achieved Inclusion Blueprint Champion from the Diversity Lab this year.
I second that, John. We'll get on the phone after this and figure that out, because I bet we can get it done. I'm positive. So let me just wrap up with a couple of quick things. One, to answer Gina's question about what meaningfully goes into comp for DEI, for practice groups and partners. When you look at it on the legal department or on the corporation side, no matter their compensation system, they've tied particular percentages to DEI contributions. So like Chipotle, for instance, 10% of the annual executive comp rewards are meaningfully connected to DEI. And then they list what that means. And for Chipotle has said we want to reach these particular diversity goals by 2025. And each of you have a role in doing that. Here are the 3 things you need to do. And at the end of the year, if you do those 3 things, here's your 10%. If you don't do those 3 things well, you don't. And that's also what we've seen McDonald's do, right? 15% of their compensation is tied to particular things. And so, Krista, you said you would come back and report, because Baker Botts is one of the only firms in this particular Inclusion Blueprint who said, not only are we tying partner and practice group comp to DEI, we're doing it in 3 ways. Those partners and practice group leaders are expected to staff equality, diversity on their teams and pitches, which you already mentioned. They're expected to share origination credit equally, and they're expected to retain their diverse lawyers at the same rate that they're retaining their non-diverse lawyers. And the thing that's important is those partners now know exactly what is tied to compensation from Baker Botts' standpoint. And I know that's new for you all and you haven't had a chance to implement it, but that was a really big leap that Baker Botts chose to take publicly. And so congratulations, because that is starting to look a lot more like corporations. And to Cooley and to Jenner and Block and Reed Smith, when we score the Inclusion Blueprint, you all were standouts in the actions that you're taking to be inclusive and equitable for everybody in your workforce. And that's clearly having a positive effect on how representation looks in your firm by all of the different ways that we've been talking. So thank you all so much from Diversity Lab and from the industry as a whole, because we get to learn from you every time you take these leaps. And finally, Gina, you are masterful at this. Thank you so much for moderating, and thank you to you as press for continuing to report on these things, because it does all push us to be better and work harder, and so that our clients can see what we're doing, but also so that we can learn from each other. So thanks to everybody who attended today. Thanks to the Diversity Lab folks who helped put this on, and in particular the champs who worked so hard to get here today. And I know we still have a lot to do, but kudos on the progress that you've made thus far.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Karen.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.